Hi, I'm Vanessa. 3 months ago, my parents told me they couldn't help me anymore. I was standing in a hospital parking lot in Denver at 2 in the morning, and my mother's voice came through the phone like ice. "We've given you enough. Figure it out yourself." My father didn't say a word. He just hung up. Last week, my phone lit up with 17 calls in one night. All from them. All desperate. All begging. Because Brooke, my perfect sister, got arrested. And suddenly, they needed me again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It started on a Tuesday in late June. The kind of day in Denver where the sky stretches wide and blue, but the air still bites if you're standing in the shade too long. I was working remotely from a cramped sublet near the university, the kind of place where the walls were thin enough to hear your neighbors sneeze and the kitchen smelled permanently of burnt popcorn. My lease was almost up, and I'd been scrambling to find something affordable while juggling freelance graphic design gigs that paid just enough to keep me afloat. That morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, calm but urgent, told me that my Aunt Helen had collapsed at her home in Phoenix. Stroke. Severe. They didn't know if she'd make it through the night. I felt the air leave my lungs. Aunt Helen wasn't just family. She was the only person who ever really saw me. The one who taught me how to use design software when I was 16. The one who told me I had something worth sharing with the world when everyone else said graphic design wasn't a real career. I packed a bag in under 10 minutes. Threw in clothes without looking, grabbed my laptop, my charger, my wallet. I didn't even lock the sublet properly. I just ran. The drive from Denver to Phoenix is supposed to take 11 hours if you don't stop. I made it in 9.5, pulling over only once for gas and a burnt coffee that tasted like regret. My hands shook the entire way. I called my parents twice. Both times, my mother answered with the same clipped tone. "We're aware. Brooke is handling the arrangements. You don't need to rush." But I did rush. Because Aunt Helen had been there when I graduated high school and my parents didn't show up because Brooke had a gallery opening for her boutique that same weekend. She'd been there when I got my first design client and no one else cared to celebrate. She mattered. And I wasn't going to let her be alone. When I arrived at Banner Medical Center, the fluorescent lights made everything look washed out and too bright. I found Aunt Helen's room on the 4th floor. She was already hooked up to machines, her face slack on one side, her breathing assisted by a ventilator. The nurse told me she'd had a massive ischemic stroke. The damage was extensive. They were doing everything they could, but the next 72 hours were critical. I sat beside her bed and held her hand. It was cold. I talked to her anyway. Told her about the logo I'd just finished for a small bakery in Boulder. Told her I'd finally started learning animation like she'd always encouraged me to. Told her I was sorry I hadn't visited more. My voice cracked, but I kept going. My parents arrived 3 hours later. My mother walked in first, wearing a tailored blazer and heels that clicked against the linoleum. My father followed, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room like he was assessing a business deal. Brooke wasn't with them. "She's busy with the boutique," my mother said before I could even ask. "She'll come by tomorrow." I stood up to hug my mother, but she stepped past me and went straight to the nurse's station. My father gave me a brief nod and sat down in the chair farthest from the bed. That was it. "No, how are you holding up?" "No, I'm glad you made it safely." Just silence and the hum of medical equipment. Over the next 2 days, I barely left the hospital. I slept in the waiting room chair, ate vending machine crackers, and made sure someone was always with Aunt Helen. My parents came and went. They'd stay for an hour, make phone calls in the hallway, then leave. Brooke showed up once, took a selfie near the hospital entrance with a caption about family strength, and left 20 minutes later because she had a vendor meeting. On the 3rd day, Aunt Helen's condition worsened. The doctors called us into a small conference room with beige walls and a box of tissues on the table. They explained that the damage was too severe. Even if she survived, her quality of life would be almost non-existent. They recommended comfort care. My mother nodded like she'd expected this. My father asked about the costs. I felt something inside me crack. That night, Aunt Helen passed away quietly with me holding her hand. I was the only one in the room. My parents had gone back to their hotel. Brooke was at a wine tasting event she'd posted about on social media. The nurse who'd been checking in on us throughout the week squeezed my shoulder gently. "She knew you were here," she said softly. "That matters." The funeral was small. Aunt Helen had been a private person, and her circle of close friends had shrunk over the years. The service was held at a modest chapel in the historic district, not far from the bungalow where she'd lived alone for the past decade. I helped arrange everything because no one else stepped up. I picked the flowers, wrote the program, chose the music. I paid for half of it with money I didn't have, swiping my credit card and watching the balance climb into territory that made my stomach turn. My parents contributed, but only after I asked directly. My mother handed me a check with a tight smile. "This should cover your half, Vanessa. We're covering the rest." Brooke was too busy to help, apparently. She showed up late to the service in a black dress that looked like it cost more than my rent. She cried beautifully for the cameras, her makeup perfectly intact. After the service, we gathered at my parents' house in Scottsdale. It was a sprawling Spanish-style villa with terracotta tiles and a fountain in the front courtyard. Inside, everything was pristine. White furniture, abstract art on the walls, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I'd never felt comfortable there. It always felt more like a showroom than a home. People milled around with small plates of catered food. I stood near the back patio, holding a glass of water I hadn't touched, when my mother found me. "We need to talk," she said quietly. She led me to my father's study, a dark wood-paneled room with leather chairs and shelves full of books no one ever read. My father was already there, standing by the window. My mother closed the door. "Vanessa, we need to discuss some things. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it's time you stood on your own 2 feet." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" She folded her hands in front of her. "We've helped you financially over the years. The sublet in Denver, the car repairs, the loan for your design equipment. We think it's time you became fully independent." I felt heat rise in my chest. "I've been working. I've been paying my own bills. The loan was 3 years ago, and I paid it back." My father finally spoke. "You came here expecting us to cover funeral costs. You've been staying at our house. You're not showing responsibility." I stared at him. "Aunt Helen just died. I drove 11 hours to be here. I've been the only one actually taking care of things." My mother's expression hardened. "That's exactly the problem, Vanessa. You're always playing the martyr. Always making everything about you. Brooke has a business to run. She has responsibilities. You freelance from your laptop. It's not the same." I felt the words hit me like a slap. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I just need a few more days to figure out my next steps. I'll find a place here in Phoenix and start fresh. I just need a little time." My father shook his head. "We're not a safety net anymore. You're 31 years old. It's time to grow up." My mother opened the study door, a clear dismissal. "We think it's best if you leave tonight. We'll give you a week to collect anything you've stored here, but after that, we're moving forward without supporting you financially or otherwise." I stood there, frozen. "Are you serious? Right now? After everything?" My mother's face didn't change. "We're serious. It's for your own good." I walked out of that study, through the living room full of people pretending to mourn, and out the front door. I got into my car, a 2009 Honda Civic that rattled when it went over 45, and I just drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. I ended up at an extended stay motel off Indian School Road. The kind of place with weekly rates and a flickering neon sign that buzzed in the dark. The room smelled like cigarette smoke masked by artificial lavender. There was a microwave, a mini fridge, and a bed with sheets that felt stiff and cheap. I sat on the edge of that bed and stared at my phone. No calls. No messages. Nothing. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Aunt Helen. About how she used to tell me that family wasn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, she'd say. Who's there when it's hard? I thought about my parents' faces in that study. Cold. Detached. Like I was a problem to be solved rather than their daughter. I thought about Brooke, who hadn't even bothered to help plan the funeral for the woman who'd been there for both of us growing up. The next morning, I counted what I had. $840 in my checking account. A maxed-out credit card. A car that needed an oil change I couldn't afford. No apartment. No job lined up in Phoenix. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. No plan. I sat at the small table near the window and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim light. I logged into my freelance accounts and started applying for anything I could find. Logo design, web layout, social media graphics. I applied to 30 gigs in 4 hours. By noon, I'd gotten 2 responses. One was a scam. The other was a legitimate small business owner looking for a rebrand. The pay was low, but it was something. I took it. Over the next week, I worked from that motel room, surviving on instant ramen and gas station coffee. I picked up 3 more clients. The work was tedious, but it kept me busy. It kept me from thinking too much about how alone I felt. I tried calling my parents once. My mother answered, her tone brisk. Vanessa, we've said what we needed to say. Please respect our boundaries. She hung up before I could respond. I tried texting Brooke. No reply. I was erased, not with silence, but with active dismissal. 2 weeks in, my car broke down. The engine just gave up one afternoon while I was driving back from the library where I'd been using the free Wi-Fi. I coasted into a gas station parking lot and called a mechanic. The estimate was $1,200. I didn't have it. I sold my car to a junkyard for $300 and started taking the bus. Phoenix in July is brutal. The heat radiates off the pavement in waves, and waiting for the bus feels like standing inside an oven. But I did it. I carried my laptop in a backpack, wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, and kept working. I found a coffee shop called the Cactus Brew Cafe that had good air conditioning and didn't mind if I stayed for hours as long as I kept buying drinks. The owner, an older man named Mr. Garrison, started recognizing me. You're here a lot, he said one afternoon. Working hard or hiding? Both, I admitted. He nodded like he understood and brought me a free refill. One evening, about a month after the funeral, I was sitting in that coffee shop when I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Claire Donovan, a woman I'd worked with briefly on a freelance project 2 years ago. She was now the creative director at a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Phoenix. Hey Vanessa, I saw you're in Phoenix now. We're looking for a contract designer for a 3-month project. Interested? I replied within minutes. Yes. Absolutely. The interview was the next day. I wore the one professional outfit I'd managed to keep clean and took 2 buses to get there. Claire remembered me. She liked my portfolio. She hired me on the spot. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was steady. It was enough to move out of the motel and into a small studio apartment near downtown. The place was tiny, barely 400 square feet, but it had a real bed, a kitchen, and windows that let in light. It felt like a small miracle. I started the contract work the following Monday. It was good to have structure again. Good to be around people, even if they didn't know my story. I kept my head down and did excellent work. Claire noticed. About 6 weeks into the contract, she called me into her office. "We want to extend your contract," she said. "And we're discussing bringing you on full-time if things keep going well." I felt something loosen in my chest. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I mean it." Life started to stabilize. I paid my bills on time. I ate real meals. I even started going to therapy with Dr. Patel, a kind woman who didn't flinch when I told her about my family. She helped me start processing everything. The grief. The rejection. The slow, painful work of rebuilding a sense of self-worth that didn't depend on my parents' approval. Then, 3 months after Aunt Helen's funeral, everything shifted again. It was a Thursday night. I was home, editing a client presentation on my laptop, when my phone started ringing. I glanced at the screen. My mother. I hesitated, then let it go to voicemail. She called again. Then my father. Then Brooke. Then my mother again. 17 calls in 2 hours. I finally answered. "What is it?" My mother's voice was shaking. "Vanessa, we need you." "It's Brooke. She's been arrested." Everything stopped. "What?" My mother started crying, something I'd never heard her do. "She's been charged with fraud and embezzlement. They took her from the boutique this afternoon. It's all over the news. We don't know what to do." My father's voice cut in. He must have been on speaker. "Vanessa, you need to come home. We need to handle this as a family." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the wall of my tiny apartment. They needed me. After everything. After cutting me off. After dismissing me. After erasing me. Now, when their golden child had fallen, they needed me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "I'll think about it," and hung up. I sat on the floor of my studio apartment, back pressed against the wall, phone still warm in my hand from that call. The air conditioner hummed in the window, pushing cool air into the room, but I felt nothing. 17 missed calls. My mother crying. My father's voice cracking around the edges. Brooke arrested. The words kept replaying in my head like a song stuck on repeat. I opened my laptop and typed her name into the search bar. The results loaded instantly. There she was, my sister, splashed across local news websites. Scottsdale boutique owner arrested on fraud charges. Local influencer accused of embezzling over $200,000. The headlines were brutal. There were photos too. Brooke being led out of her boutique in handcuffs, her face turned away from the cameras, her perfectly styled hair falling across her cheek. The same boutique she'd posted about endlessly. The same business my parents had poured money into, bragged about at every family gathering, held up as proof that she was the successful one. I clicked on one of the articles. According to the report, Brooke had been running a scheme for over 18 months. She'd been taking investor money meant for expanding her boutique and funneling it into personal accounts. Luxury vacations. Designer handbags. A new car. She'd falsified records, created fake invoices, and lied to multiple investors about where their money was going. One of her former business partners, a woman named Monica Reed, had finally gotten suspicious and hired a forensic accountant. The evidence was damning. Bank statements. Email trails. Forged signatures. I read through 3 different articles, each one adding another layer of detail. The investors weren't just strangers. Some of them were family friends. People my parents knew from their country club. People who'd trusted Brooke because of her polished image and our family's reputation. Now they were filing lawsuits. The district attorney was pursuing criminal charges. Brooke was out on bail, but her boutique had been shut down pending investigation. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. Part of me felt vindicated. The golden child had fallen. The perfect daughter who could do no wrong had been exposed. But another part of me, the part that still remembered us as kids building blanket forts in the living room, felt something closer to sadness. Not for her. For what this said about all of us. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. From my father. Vanessa, please. We need to talk. This is serious. Your mother is beside herself. We need you here. I read it twice, then set the phone face down on the floor. I didn't respond. Not yet. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. Claire was in early, reviewing mock-ups for a campaign launch. She looked up when I walked in. Morning, she said brightly. Ready to tackle this rebrand? I nodded, dropped my bag at my desk, and got to work. For the next 8 hours, I buried myself in color palettes and typography choices. It felt good to focus on something concrete. Something I could control. But during my lunch break, I checked my phone again. 23 missed calls now. More texts. My mother. My father. Even Brooke. Hers was the one that stopped me. Vanessa, I know we haven't talked in a while. I know things have been complicated. But I need you. Please call me back. I'm scared. I stared at that message for a long time. She was scared. I'd been scared too, 3 months ago, sitting in a hospital waiting room wondering if Aunt Helen would survive the night. I'd been scared when my parents cut me off and I didn't know how I'd pay rent. But no one had called me then. No one had said please. No one had said I need you. I deleted the message and went back to work. That evening, Claire asked me to stay late to finish up some final edits. I agreed, grateful for the distraction. We worked until almost 8, ordering takeout and going through revisions. When we finally wrapped up, she leaned back in her chair and stretched. You've been doing great work, Vanessa. Really solid. I wanted to let you know we're officially offering you the full-time position. Benefits, salary, the whole thing. We'll have the paperwork ready by Monday. I felt a swell of relief so strong it almost knocked me sideways. Thank you, I said, and I meant it with every part of me. She smiled. You've earned it. Go home and celebrate. I packed up my things and took the bus back to my apartment. The streets were quieter at night, the heat finally breaking into something tolerable. I walked the last 2 blocks from the bus stop, feeling the weight of the day settle into my shoulders. When I got inside, I sat on my bed and opened my phone one more time. 31 missed calls. I scrolled through the voicemails, not listening, just watching the timestamps. Then I saw something that made me pause. A voicemail from Aunt Helen's lawyer. I'd forgotten she even had one. I pressed play. His voice was calm and professional. Ms. Hartley, this is Robert Nguyen. I'm the attorney who handled your Aunt Helen's estate. I've been trying to reach you regarding her will. There are some items she left specifically to you, and we need to schedule a time to go over the details. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I saved the voicemail and stared at the screen. Aunt Helen had left me something. I hadn't even thought about her will. I'd been too focused on surviving. I called the number back, even though it was late. It went to voicemail. I left a message saying I'd be available anytime the next day. That night, I dreamed about Aunt Helen's house. The little bungalow with the turquoise shutters and the garden full of succulents. I dreamed about sitting on her porch while she showed me how to use Photoshop for the first time, her patience endless as I fumbled through layers and filters. I woke up with tears on my face. The lawyer called me back the next morning while I was getting ready for work. He was kind and efficient. He explained that Aunt Helen had updated her will 2 years ago. She'd left most of her estate to a few charities, but there were specific bequests for family. To me, she'd left her house. The bungalow in the historic district. Fully paid off. Along with a savings account that held $38,000. I sat down on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, unable to speak. Ms. Hartley? Are you still there? I'm here, I whispered. I just wasn't expecting this. He continued. She also left you a letter. It's sealed. I have it here in my office whenever you're ready to pick it up. We can schedule a time to finalize the paperwork for the property transfer as well. I agreed to meet him that afternoon. I called Claire and asked if I could leave early. She didn't hesitate. Of course. Take the time you need. I took 2 buses to the lawyer's office in Central Phoenix. The building was modest, tucked between a credit union and a dental office. Robert and Gwen met me in a small conference room with wood-paneled walls and a window overlooking a parking lot. He handed me a folder with documents about the house and the account. Then he handed me an envelope. Cream-colored paper, my name written across the front in Aunt Helen's looping handwriting. I held it carefully, like it might dissolve if I gripped it too hard. Take your time, he said gently. I'll step out and give you some privacy. When he left, I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. I unfolded it and began to read. Dearest Vanessa, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I hope I got to say goodbye properly. But knowing life, I probably didn't. So let me say it now. You have always been the one who saw things clearly. The one who cared when it wasn't convenient. The one who showed up. I've watched you try to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely, and it broke my heart. So I'm giving you something they can't take away. A home. A foundation. A place to start fresh. You don't owe anyone your light, Vanessa. Shine it where it's appreciated. Build something beautiful. And know that I always believed in you, even when you couldn't believe in yourself. With all my love, Aunt Helen. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. When Robert returned, I signed the paperwork transferring the house into my name. He handed me the keys, solid and real in my palm. I drove out to the house that evening in a rideshare, not trusting the bus with how emotional I was. The bungalow looked exactly as I remembered. Turquoise shutters. A small front porch with a wooden bench. The garden slightly overgrown but still full of life. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It smelled like her. Like lavender and old books. The furniture was still there, covered in sheets. Her artwork on the walls. Her dishes in the kitchen. I walked through each room slowly, touching surfaces, opening drawers, feeling the weight of her absence and her presence all at once. In her bedroom, on the dresser, I found a small wooden box. Inside was a turquoise bracelet, the one she used to wear every day. I slipped it onto my wrist. It fit perfectly. I sat on her couch, pulled the sheets off, and let myself cry. Not sad tears. Grateful ones. Aunt Helen had seen me. Even at the end. Even when no one else did. She'd made sure I'd be okay. My phone buzzed. Another text from my mother. Vanessa, please. Brooke's arraignment is Monday. We need you there. The family needs to show unity. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I typed a response. I'm not coming. You cut me off when I needed you. You don't get to demand I show up now because it's convenient. I hit send before I could second guess myself. The response came within seconds. How dare you? After everything we've done for you. This is your sister. I typed back. Aunt Helen died and you told me to figure it out on my own. I did. Now you do the same. I blocked all 3 of them. My mother. My father. Brooke. The silence that followed felt like exhaling after holding my breath for months. Over the weekend, I moved out of my studio apartment and into Aunt Helen's house. It didn't take long. I didn't have much. Claire helped me, showing up with her truck and refusing to let me pay for gas. We carried boxes through the front door, set up my bed in the guest room, and arranged my small desk near the window in the living room. This place has good energy, Claire said, looking around. You're going to do great things here. On Monday morning, I didn't go to Brooke's arraignment. I went to work. I sat at my new desk in the marketing firm, now official as a full-time employee with my name on the directory board. I designed a brand identity for a nonprofit that worked with underserved communities. I felt purposeful. Solid. But Monday evening, my phone started lighting up again. Not from my parents this time. From numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored the first few, then curiosity got the better of me. I answered one. A woman's voice, clipped and professional. Is this Vanessa Hartley? Yes, I said cautiously. This is Angela Ruiz from Channel 12 News. We're doing a story on Brooke Hartley's fraud case, and we understand you're her sister. Would you be willing to comment? I hung up immediately. 2 more reporters called within the hour. I blocked those numbers too. Then I got a text from a number that wasn't saved. It's Monica Reed, Brooke's former business partner. I know this is strange, but I'd like to talk to you if you're willing. I have some information I think you should know. I hesitated, then replied. I'm willing to listen. We agreed to meet the next day at a quiet cafe on the east side of town. I arrived early, ordered a coffee, and sat near the back. Monica showed up 10 minutes later. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, wearing business casual. She sat down across from me and didn't waste time. I'm not here to drag you into anything, she started. But I want you to know what really happened. Brooke didn't act alone. Your parents knew. I stared at her. What do you mean they knew? Monica pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were printed emails. Correspondence between Brooke and my father. Discussions about moving money. Strategies for covering expenses. My father's signature on documents approving transfers that were later reported as fraudulent. They were helping her, Monica said quietly. Maybe they didn't know how deep it went at first, but they knew enough. And when I started asking questions, your mother tried to pay me off to stay quiet. She offered me $75,000 to drop my concerns and sign an NDA. I refused. That's when I hired the accountant and went to the authorities. I felt the room tilt slightly. My parents hadn't just enabled Brooke. They'd participated. And when it started to fall apart, they'd tried to bury it. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Monica's expression softened. Because when I was doing my research, I found your name in some old financial documents. Your parents had been funneling money meant for you into Brooke's business. An education fund your Aunt Helen had set up years ago. It was supposed to go to you when you turned 25. They diverted it. I couldn't breathe. How much? About $42,000, Monica said. I have the records if you want them. I can't guarantee you'll get it back, but you have grounds for a lawsuit if you want to pursue it. I took the folder. I didn't open it. I just held it. Thank you, I said quietly. She nodded. You deserve to know the truth. Your sister got caught. But your parents are just as guilty. After she left, I sat in that cafe for another hour, staring at the folder. $42,000. Money that was supposed to help me build a life. Money that had been stolen and handed to Brooke to prop up a business built on lies. I thought about all the times I'd struggled. The maxed out credit card. The nights in that motel. The car I'd sold for scraps. And the whole time, they'd had money that was mine. I took the folder home. I spread the documents across Aunt Helen's dining table and read every single page. Bank statements. Email threads. Signed authorizations. It was all there. My father's name. My mother's signature. Dates that went back 5 years. They'd been doing this long before Aunt Helen died. Long before they cut me off. The next morning, I called Patricia Gomez, the attorney Robert Nguyen had recommended for family estate issues. I explained everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You have a case. A strong one. If you want to pursue this, we can file. It won't be easy. Family lawsuits never are. But you're entitled to that money, and they broke the law by diverting it. I thought about it for 2 days. I walked through Aunt Helen's garden. I sat on her porch with a cup of tea. I wore her turquoise bracelet and imagined what she would say. Finally, I called Patricia back. Let's file. The lawsuit was filed quietly. No press. No drama. Just legal paperwork submitted to the court. My parents were notified within a week. I didn't hear from them directly, but I heard through Monica that they'd hired a lawyer and were preparing to fight it. Let them fight, I thought. I had the truth on my side. The weeks that followed felt surreal, like I was living in 2 parallel versions of my life. In one version, I went to work every day at the marketing firm, collaborated with Claire on campaigns, grabbed lunch at the Cactus Brew Cafe, and slowly transformed Aunt Helen's bungalow into something that felt like mine. In the other version, I was in the middle of a legal battle that pulled me back into the family I'd been trying to leave behind. Patricia worked efficiently. She filed motions, gathered evidence, and kept me updated through concise emails that never sugarcoated the reality. Your parents are claiming the fund was a family asset that they had discretion over. They're arguing that the money was used for family purposes and that Brooke's business benefited everyone. It's weak, but they're pushing it. We're countering with the original trust documents that clearly name you as the sole beneficiary. I read those emails in the evenings, sitting at Aunt Helen's kitchen table with a mug of chamomile tea. The house had become my sanctuary. I'd painted the guest bedroom a soft gray. I'd cleared out some of Aunt Helen's old furniture and brought in a proper desk for my design work. I'd planted new succulents in the front garden and fixed the squeaky hinge on the screen door. Every small change felt like reclaiming something. Claire noticed the shift in me. We were working late one Thursday, finalizing a pitch for a potential client, when she looked up from her laptop. You seem different lately. In a good way. More grounded. I smiled. I think I'm finally building something that's mine. She nodded thoughtfully. That's the best kind of foundation. The kind you create yourself. But the piece I was building kept getting interrupted. 3 weeks after filing the lawsuit, I started receiving messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Distant cousins. Old family friends. People who'd known my parents through their social circles. Most of the messages followed the same script. I heard about the lawsuit. I hope you know what you're doing. Family is everything. You should really reconsider tearing them apart like this. I didn't respond to any of them. I'd learned that explaining yourself to people who'd already chosen a side was pointless. They didn't want the truth. They wanted me to fall back in line and make everything comfortable again. But I was done making myself small for other people's comfort. Then came the message that actually surprised me. It was from Detective Sarah Harris, the lead investigator on Brooke's fraud case. Ms. Hartley, I'd like to speak with you regarding your sister's case. I understand you filed a civil suit against your parents. Some of the documentation you've submitted may be relevant to our investigation. Would you be available for a conversation? I called Patricia immediately. Should I talk to her? Patricia didn't hesitate. Yes. Absolutely. If the criminal investigation overlaps with your civil case, it only strengthens your position. Just be honest. Stick to the facts. I'll be there with you. We met Detective Harris at a small office building near the courthouse. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and eyes that didn't miss anything. She shook my hand firmly and gestured for us to sit. Thank you for coming in. I know this isn't easy. She spread several documents across the table between us. I've been building the case against your sister for 4 months now. The evidence of her fraud is substantial. But as I've dug deeper, I've found transactions that involve your parents. Transfers that were authorized by your father. Emails where your mother discussed strategies for covering expenses that were later falsified on investor reports. They weren't just enablers. They were participants. I felt my stomach tighten. Are they going to be charged? Detective Harris leaned back in her chair. That depends on what else we find. Right now, we're still building the case. But the documents Monica Reed provided, combined with what your attorney submitted in the civil suit, paint a pretty clear picture. I need to ask you some questions about your family dynamics. About how decisions were made. About whether you ever witnessed conversations or transactions that seemed unusual. For the next hour, I answered her questions. I told her about growing up in that house where Brooke could do no wrong. I told her about the times my parents had brushed off my concerns or accomplishments while celebrating Brooke's every move. I told her about the education fund Aunt Helen had set up, about how I'd never received any of it, about how I'd only learned it existed through Monica's investigation. Detective Harris took notes, her expression neutral but focused. When we finished, she closed her notebook and looked at me directly. I want you to know that what happened to you matters. Not just legally, but ethically. Your parents violated your trust in more ways than one. I appreciate your cooperation. If we need anything else, I'll reach out through your attorney. Patricia and I left the building together. The late afternoon sun was brutal, and I squinted against the glare. How do you feel? Patricia asked. I thought about it. Validated, I said finally. Like maybe I wasn't imagining how bad it was. She nodded. You weren't. And now there's a record of it. That evening, I went home and tried to distract myself with work. I had a freelance project due, a logo redesign for a local nonprofit that worked with kids in foster care. I opened the files and started sketching concepts, but my mind kept drifting. I kept thinking about Detective Harris's words. Your parents violated your trust in more ways than one. It wasn't just about the money. It was about every time they'd chosen Brooke over me. Every time they'd dismissed my feelings. Every time they'd made me feel like I was the problem. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Vanessa, this is Richard. I got a new number because you blocked me. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. You're destroying this family over money. Is that really who you want to be? I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. He was trying to guilt me. Trying to frame this as me being petty and vindictive. Like I was the one who'd stolen from my own child. Like I was the one who'd cut off my daughter during the hardest time of her life. I typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally, I just blocked the number. Actions, not words. That was my new rule. But the messages didn't stop. Over the next week, I received emails, voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize, even a handwritten letter delivered to Aunt Helen's house. All of them said the same thing in different words. You're being selfish. You're tearing the family apart. Brooke is struggling and you're making it worse. Your mother is devastated. How can you live with yourself? I saved every message. Patricia had told me to document everything. Harassment, she'd said. It might come in handy. I created a folder on my laptop and dropped every screenshot, every voicemail transcript, every scanned letter into it. I labeled it evidence and tried not to think too hard about how sad it was that I needed a folder like that. One night, I couldn't sleep. I got up around 2 in the morning and made tea, then sat on Aunt Helen's porch in the cool desert air. The neighborhood was silent except for the occasional car passing on the main road a few blocks away. I thought about how different my life looked now compared to 3 months ago. I had a home. A job. Stability. But I also had a family that was actively trying to tear me down for refusing to be their scapegoat anymore. The next day at work, Claire pulled me aside. There's something I need to tell you, and I don't want you to freak out. My stomach dropped. What is it? She pulled out her phone and showed me a social media post. It was from my mother. A long, emotional caption over a photo of her and Brooke at some charity event from years ago. The post read, "It's heartbreaking when a family member chooses bitterness over love. We've tried to support Vanessa through her struggles, but she's decided to turn her back on us during our darkest time. Brooke made mistakes, yes, but we believe in forgiveness and redemption. We're praying Vanessa finds peace and stops trying to hurt the people who've only ever wanted the best for her. I felt heat rise in my chest. She was making me the villain. Publicly. Painting herself as the victim and me as the cruel, ungrateful daughter. The post had hundreds of comments. Most of them were supportive of her. Sending prayers. Family is everything. Some people just can't be helped. A few people pushed back, asking for context, but they were drowned out. Claire watched my face carefully. I'm sorry. I thought you should know. I handed the phone back. It's fine. Let her say what she wants. Claire hesitated. Do you want to respond? Set the record straight? I shook my head. No. The truth is already on record. In legal documents. In a detective's case file. I don't need to defend myself to strangers on the internet. But it stung. I won't pretend it didn't. That night, I almost typed out a response. I drafted a post explaining everything. The stolen fund. The cutoff during Aunt Helen's death. The evidence of their involvement in Brooke's fraud. I wrote and rewrote it, making sure every word was factual and measured. Then I deleted the entire thing. Patricia's voice echoed in my head. Don't give them ammunition. Stay quiet. Let the legal process do the talking. So I did. I stayed silent. But other people didn't. Within 2 days, someone leaked parts of the civil lawsuit to a local blogger who covered Phoenix society drama. The blogger wrote a detailed post outlining the allegations. The stolen education fund. The evidence of my parents' involvement in the fraud. The timeline of them cutting me off. The post went viral in local circles. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Comments on my mother's post started changing. Wait, there's more to this story. Did you see what actually happened? This family is messier than it looks. My mother deleted the post within 24 hours, but screenshots had already spread. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Patricia called me that evening. The leak wasn't from us, but it's working in our favor. Public opinion doesn't win lawsuits, but it does put pressure on the other side. Your parents' lawyer reached out. They want to talk settlement. I sat down on the couch. What kind of settlement? Patricia's tone was careful. They're offering to return $30,000 of the original $42,000, plus cover your legal fees. In exchange, you drop the suit and sign an NDA. No public statements. No further legal action. I closed my eyes. 30,000. Not even the full amount. And an NDA to keep me silent. What do you think? I asked. Patricia paused. It's not a bad offer financially. You'd get most of the money without the stress of a prolonged trial. But the NDA means you can't talk about any of this publicly. Ever. It also means they don't have to admit fault. It's a clean exit for them. I thought about Aunt Helen's letter. You don't owe anyone your light. Shine it where it's appreciated. I thought about Detective Harris's investigation, about how my testimony and documents were helping build a criminal case. I thought about the other people my parents might hurt if they were allowed to walk away quietly. No, I said firmly. No settlement. We're going to trial. Patricia didn't sound surprised. Okay. I'll let them know. The trial date was set for 2 months out. In the meantime, life continued. I kept working. I kept building. Claire promoted me to senior designer, which came with a raise and more creative control over projects. I used the extra money to buy real furniture for the house. A couch that didn't sag. A dining table where I could spread out my work. Bookshelves for the design books I'd been collecting. I also started volunteering. Once a week, I taught a free design workshop at the community center near Burton Bar Library. Most of the students were teenagers or young adults who couldn't afford formal classes. I showed them how to use free software, how to build a portfolio, how to pitch themselves to clients. It felt good to give back. To be the person for them that Aunt Helen had been for me. One of my students, a quiet kid named Carlos, stayed after class one evening. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. "Sure," I replied, packing up my laptop. He hesitated. "I heard some people talking about you. About your family. About the lawsuit. I just wanted to say I think it's cool that you're standing up for yourself. My family's kind of a mess too, and sometimes I feel like I'm supposed to just take it. But watching you fight back makes me think maybe I don't have to." I didn't know what to say. I felt a lump form in my throat. "You don't have to take it," I said quietly. "You're allowed to protect yourself. Even from family. Especially from family." He nodded, then left. I sat in that empty community room for a few minutes, staring at the whiteboard where I'd drawn logo concepts. I thought about all the ways we internalize the belief that family gets a free pass to hurt us. That blood excuses damage. That loyalty means silence. The trial prep consumed my evenings. Patricia walked me through what to expect. We'd present the trust documents. We'd show the diversion of funds. We'd call Monica Reed as a witness. We'd enter the emails and authorizations as evidence. The defense would try to argue that my parents acted in good faith, that they believed they were making decisions for the family's benefit. We'd counter that the trust was legally binding and they had no authority to redirect it. A week before the trial, I got a surprise visitor. I was working in the garden, pulling weeds from around the succulents, when a car pulled up in front of the house. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and watched as Brooke stepped out. She looked different. Thinner. No makeup. Her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She walked slowly up the path, hands shoved in the pockets of an oversized sweater. "Vanessa," she said quietly. I didn't respond. I just waited. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Just for a few minutes." I crossed my arms. "You have 5 minutes." She nodded, looking down at her feet. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt a lot of people. I'm probably going to prison. My lawyer says the evidence is too strong. I'm trying to take a plea deal, but even with that, I'm looking at years." I didn't soften. "Why are you here, Brooke?" She looked up, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Because I need you to know that Mom and Dad, they pushed me. Not at first. At first, it was my idea. But when things started falling apart, they helped me cover it up. They told me it would be fine. That we'd figure it out. And when it all came crashing down, they acted like they had no idea. Like I did it all alone." I felt something shift in my chest. "Are you saying this because you want my forgiveness, or because you want me to know the truth?" "Both," she admitted. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I forgive myself. But I wanted you to know that you're not wrong about them. You never were. They always chose me, and it ruined both of us." Her 5 minutes were up, but I let her keep talking. She told me about the pressure. About how every success was never enough. About how she built her entire identity around being the favorite and didn't know who she was without it. About how she'd started stealing because she couldn't admit she was failing. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained something. When she finally stopped talking, I took a breath. "I'm not dropping the lawsuit." She nodded. "I know. I'm not asking you to. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For all of it. For every time I let them put you down. For every time I took something that should have been yours. I'm sorry, Vanessa." She turned and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away, and I felt something strange. Not forgiveness. Not quite. But maybe the beginning of letting go. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. I'd driven past it dozens of times without really noticing it, a beige building tucked between the county offices and a parking structure. The morning of the trial, I arrived 30 minutes early, wearing a navy dress Claire had helped me pick out. Professional but not trying too hard. Patricia met me in the lobby, carrying 2 leather briefcases and looking completely unruffled. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. She led me through security, up 2 flights of stairs, and down a hallway lined with courtroom doors. Ours was at the end. We pushed through the heavy wooden door into a room that felt almost anticlimactic. Rows of benches. A judge's bench at the front. Fluorescent lighting that made everything look washed out. My parents were already there, seated at the defense table with their attorney, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit. My mother didn't look at me. She sat very still, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the table in front of her. My father glanced over once, his expression unreadable, then looked away. Their lawyer, a man named Gerald Hutchins, shuffled papers and whispered something to them. I sat down next to Patricia at the plaintiff's table. My hands were shaking slightly, so I pressed them flat against my thighs and focused on breathing. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. Everyone rose, then sat again. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. "This is a civil matter involving the estate of Helen Hartley, specifically a disputed educational trust fund. We'll hear opening statements, then proceed with evidence and witness testimony. Let's keep this efficient and respectful. Ms. Gomez, you may begin." Patricia stood, buttoning her blazer. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Helen Hartley established a trust fund in 2012 specifically for her niece, Vanessa Hartley, to be used for educational and professional development purposes. The trust documents are clear and legally binding. The defendants, Richard and Diane Hartley, diverted $42,000 from this trust without authorization and funneled it into their other daughter's business. We have bank records, email correspondence, and signed documents proving this diversion. We're seeking the return of those funds plus interest and legal fees." She sat down. Gerald Hutchins rose, his movements deliberate and practiced. "Your Honor, the defense does not dispute that funds were moved. However, context matters. The Hartley family operated under the understanding that family assets were flexible resources meant to support all family members as needed. Richard and Diane Hartley believed, in good faith, that supporting one daughter's business venture would ultimately benefit the entire family, including Vanessa. There was no malicious intent. This is a family disagreement, not a crime." I felt my jaw tighten. Good faith. That phrase kept coming up like they actually believed it. The judge made a note and nodded. "Proceed with your evidence, Ms. Gomez." Patricia called her first witness, Robert Nguyen, Aunt Helen's attorney. He took the stand and was sworn in. She walked him through the creation of the trust, the specific language naming me as the sole beneficiary, and the safeguards Aunt Helen had put in place to ensure the money couldn't be redirected. Did Helen Hartley ever indicate that she wanted this fund to be available to other family members? Patricia asked. "No," Robert said firmly. She was very clear. This was for Vanessa only. She even added a clause stating that if Vanessa predeceased her, the funds should go to a scholarship program, not to other family members. Patricia entered the trust documents into evidence. "Thank you. No further questions." Gerald Hutchins stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Nguyen, did Helen Hartley ever discuss the family dynamics with you? Did she mention any tensions or conflicts?" Robert hesitated. "She mentioned that she worried about Vanessa being overlooked. But she didn't elaborate." Hutchins nodded. "So it's possible she created this trust because she had a biased view of the family situation, rather than objective facts." Patricia objected immediately. "Speculation." The judge sustained it. "Move on, Mr. Hutchins." He asked a few more questions, trying to cast doubt on Aunt Helen's intentions, but Robert held firm. When he stepped down, Patricia called Monica Reed. Monica entered the courtroom with the same calm confidence she'd shown at the cafe. She was sworn in and took the seat. Patricia led her through her business relationship with Brooke, the discovery of the fraud, and the financial documents she'd uncovered. During your investigation, did you find any evidence that Richard and Diane Hartley were involved in the financial irregularities? Patricia asked. Yes, Monica said. I found emails between Richard Hartley and Brooke discussing transfers that were later reported as business investments but were actually personal expenditures. I also found a document signed by Diane Hartley authorizing a payment that was falsified on investor reports. She paused. And I discovered the diversion of Vanessa's trust fund during my forensic accounting review. The funds were transferred into an account controlled by Richard Hartley, then moved into Brooke's business within 2 weeks. Patricia entered the emails and financial records into evidence. Thank you. No further questions. Gerald Hutchins approached Monica with a tight smile. Ms. Reed, you're currently involved in your own lawsuit against Brooke Hartley, correct? Yes, Monica said. So you have a financial incentive to paint the Hartley family in a negative light. Objection, Patricia said sharply. Ms. Reed's lawsuit is a separate matter and doesn't impact the validity of the financial documents. Sustained, the judge said. Stick to relevant questions, Mr. Hutchins. He tried a few more angles, suggesting Monica's investigation was biased or incomplete, but she didn't waver. When she stepped down, the judge called for a short recess. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked tired but steady. You're doing fine, Patricia said when I came back out. They're scrambling. It's a good sign. When court resumed, Patricia called me to the stand. I walked up, my legs feeling unsteady, and placed my hand on the Bible. I swore to tell the truth, then sat down. Patricia started with gentle questions. My background. My relationship with Aunt Helen. How I'd learned about the trust. Then she moved to the harder stuff. Tell the court about the period surrounding Aunt Helen's death. What was happening in your life? I took a breath. I was living in Denver, working freelance. I got a call that Aunt Helen had a stroke. I drove to Phoenix immediately and stayed with her in the hospital for 3 days until she passed. After the funeral, my parents told me they were cutting me off financially. They asked me to leave their house that same night. My voice cracked slightly. I had to stay in a motel. I had less than $1,000. I didn't know about the trust fund until months later. And when did you learn about the diversion of funds? Patricia asked. About 3 months ago. Monica Reed contacted me during her investigation into Brooke's fraud case. She showed me the records. That's when I found out the money Aunt Helen left for me had been taken. Patricia nodded. How did that make you feel? I looked directly at my parents for the first time. Betrayed. Like I'd been erased. Like even the one person who tried to protect me couldn't, because they found a way to take that too. Patricia asked a few more questions, then turned me over for cross-examination. Gerald Hutchins stood, holding a notepad. Ms. Hartley, you've had a strained relationship with your parents for some time, correct? I wouldn't say strained. I'd say they prioritized my sister. He smiled thinly. Isn't it true that you've struggled financially for years and that your parents helped you multiple times? They helped occasionally, I said. But they also held it over me. And they never told me about the trust fund that was legally mine. Hutchins pressed on. Isn't it possible that your parents were simply trying to balance the needs of 2 daughters and made decisions they thought were best for the family as a whole? No, I said firmly. Because the trust wasn't a family asset. It was mine. Aunt Helen made that clear. They didn't have the right to take it, no matter what their intentions were. He tried a few more questions, but I didn't budge. When I stepped down, Patricia gave me a small nod of approval. The defense called my father to the stand. He walked up stiffly, his expression neutral. Gerald Hutchins led him through his version of events. How he and my mother had always tried to support both daughters. How Brooke's business had seemed promising. How they believed the trust money could be better used to help her get established, with the intention of paying it back later. It all sounded so reasonable the way he said it. Like a misunderstanding rather than theft. Patricia stood for cross-examination. Mr. Hartley, did you ever ask Vanessa's permission to use her trust fund? No, he admitted. Did you inform her that the fund existed before taking the money? No. Did you inform her after taking the money? No. Patricia let that sit for a moment. So you took $42,000 that legally belonged to your daughter without her knowledge or consent, and you never told her. Is that correct? He shifted in his seat. We intended to replace it. Patricia walked to the evidence table and picked up a document. This is a bank statement from the account where you deposited the diverted trust funds. Can you explain why, 3 months after the transfer, you moved the money into Brooke's business account instead of replacing it as you claim you intended? My father's jaw tightened. Circumstances changed. Brooke needed the capital. Patricia raised an eyebrow. And Vanessa needed her education fund. But she didn't get it, did she? Objection, Hutchins said. Argumentative. Overruled, the judge said. Answer the question, Mr. Hartley. No, my father said quietly. She didn't get it. Patricia pressed him on the emails, on the timeline, on every decision that had led to the diversion. By the time she was done, he looked worn down. My mother was called next. She testified with more emotion, painting herself as a mother caught between 2 daughters, trying to do her best. But Patricia dismantled that too, showing emails where my mother had actively discussed how to hide the transfers from me. The trial lasted 2 days. Witnesses. Documents. Arguments. By the end, I felt wrung out. The judge took a day to review everything, then called us back for the verdict. We filed into the courtroom again, the same faces in the same seats. The judge looked over her notes, then addressed the room. I've reviewed the evidence and testimony. The trust established by Helen Hartley was clear and legally binding. The defendants had no authority to divert those funds. The plaintiff is entitled to the full amount of $42,000, plus interest accrued over the period of diversion, totaling $48,000. Additionally, the defendants will cover the plaintiff's legal fees. I felt Patricia's hand on my arm, grounding me. The judge continued. I want to add that while I understand family dynamics are complicated, the law exists to protect individuals from exactly this kind of overreach. Vanessa Hartley was entitled to those funds, and that entitlement doesn't disappear because other family members deemed themselves better judges of how it should be used. Judgment for the plaintiff. The gavel came down. It was over. I sat there, not quite believing it. Patricia leaned over. You won. Completely. I nodded, unable to speak. Across the room, my parents stood. My mother's face was pale. My father's expression was hard, closed off. Their lawyer murmured something to them, and they left without looking back. Outside the courthouse, the sun was bright and harsh. Patricia walked me to my car. The payment will be processed within 30 days. Once you receive it, this case is closed. I looked at her. Thank you. For everything. She smiled. You did the hard part. You stood up. That's not easy. I drove home slowly, processing everything. When I pulled up to Aunt Helen's house, I sat in the car for a few minutes, just breathing. Then I went inside, made tea, and sat on the porch. The victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet. Like setting down something heavy I'd been carrying for too long. I picked up my phone and texted Claire. It's over. I won. She responded immediately. I'm coming over. She showed up 20 minutes later with takeout and a bottle of sparkling cider. We ate on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. She didn't ask for details. She just sat with me. That was enough. That night, I opened my laptop and started working on a new project. Not for a client. For me. A digital art piece combining design elements and photography. Something abstract and layered. Something that felt like rebuilding. I worked until my eyes burned, then saved the file and closed the laptop. I looked around the house. At the furniture I'd chosen. The walls I'd painted. The life I was creating. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine. And no one could take that away. The money arrived in my account 26 days after the verdict. I was at work when I got the notification, sitting at my desk reviewing mock-ups for a nonprofit's annual report. My phone buzzed with an alert from my banking app. I opened it and stared at the number. $48,000. For a moment, I just sat there, watching the screen like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something else. But they stayed put. Real. Final. Claire noticed. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I turned my phone toward her. The settlement came through. Her eyes widened. Holy hell, Vanessa. That's incredible. I nodded slowly, still processing. Yeah. It is. She grinned. We're celebrating. Tonight. My place. I'm cooking, and you're bringing nothing but yourself. Deal? Deal, I said, smiling despite the strange hollowness I felt. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I kept checking my account between tasks, half convinced the deposit would vanish. But it didn't. When I got home that evening, I sat at Aunt Helen's dining table and opened my laptop. I created a spreadsheet. Column 1, Debts. Column 2, Necessities. Column 3, Future. I worked through it methodically. The maxed-out credit card from Denver. Paid off. The personal loan I'd taken out for design equipment years ago. Cleared. The medical bills from Aunt Helen's hospital stay that I'd quietly been chipping away at. Gone. What remained was still substantial. I stared at the number for a long time. This was more money than I'd ever had at once. More security than I'd felt in years. I thought about Aunt Helen. About how she'd planned this, how she tried to protect me even after she was gone. I decided to honor that. I transferred $10,000 into a high-yield savings account and labeled it emergency fund. Another $5,000 went into an investment account Claire had recommended months ago. The rest I left accessible but untouched. Not because I didn't need it, but because I wanted to be intentional about how I used it. That night at Claire's apartment, we made pasta from scratch and drank sparkling cider out of mismatched wine glasses. She toasted to new beginnings, and I felt the weight of the past few months start to lift just slightly. You know what's wild? I said, twirling pasta on my fork. I thought winning would feel different. Like some big cathartic release. But mostly I just feel tired. Claire nodded. That's normal. You've been fighting for so long. Your body doesn't know how to stop yet. Give it time. Over the next few weeks, I focused on building routines that felt sustainable. I kept teaching my weekly design workshop at the community center. I took on a few freelance projects outside of my full-time job, not because I needed the money, but because I enjoyed the creative freedom. I started running in the mornings before work, something I'd never had the energy or mental space for before. The rhythm of it, the repetition, felt meditative. One Saturday afternoon, I was reorganizing Aunt Helen's bookshelves when I found a small wooden box tucked behind a stack of design annuals. I pulled it out and opened it carefully. Inside were old photographs. Aunt Helen as a young woman, standing in front of an art studio. Aunt Helen with my grandmother, both of them laughing at some long-forgotten joke. And near the bottom, a photo of me. I couldn't have been more than 7, sitting at Aunt Helen's kitchen table with a crayon in my hand, drawing something on a large sheet of paper. She'd kept it all these years. Underneath the photos was a folded piece of paper. I opened it and recognized Aunt Helen's handwriting immediately. It was dated 2 years before her death. A letter she'd never sent, or maybe never intended to. Vanessa, it began. I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately. Not the big, showy kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that lives in how we treat people when no one's watching. You have that kind of legacy already, even if you don't see it yet. You show up. You care. You build things with your hands and your heart. Don't let anyone convince you that's not enough. Don't let them make you small. The world needs people who build, not people who take. Be the builder. Always. Love, Aunt Helen. I sat on the floor of that room and cried. Not sad tears, but something deeper. Gratitude mixed with grief mixed with a fierce determination to live up to the person she believed I could be. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a frame. I hung it above my desk where I could see it every day. A month after the settlement, I got a call from Detective Harris. She asked if I could come down to her office. There's been a development in Brooke's case, she said. I'd like to discuss it with you. I met her the next afternoon at the same building where we'd talked months earlier. She looked more tired than I remembered, like the case had worn on her too. She gestured for me to sit and slid a folder across the desk. Your sister accepted a plea deal last week. She's pleading guilty to multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. She'll serve 4 years, possibly less with good behavior. I opened the folder. Inside were documents outlining the charges, the evidence, the sentencing recommendations. And your parents? I asked quietly. Detective Harris leaned back in her chair. That's more complicated. We have enough evidence to charge them as accessories, but the DA is weighing whether it's worth pursuing. Your father's lawyer is negotiating. They're offering restitution to the defrauded investors in exchange for reduced charges. It's likely they'll avoid jail time but face significant financial penalties and probation. I absorbed that. So they get to walk away. More or less, Detective Harris said. I know that's not satisfying. But for what it's worth, their reputations are destroyed. The community knows what they did. They've lost their standing. Sometimes that's its own kind of consequences. I nodded slowly. I wasn't sure how I felt. Part of me wanted them to face harsher punishment. But another part of me was just exhausted by the whole thing. I'm glad Brooke's taking responsibility, I said finally. That's something, at least. Detective Harris studied me. You did good, Vanessa. Coming forward. Providing documentation. You helped a lot of people get justice. I don't know if anyone's told you that, but you should hear it. I felt a lump form in my throat. Thank you. That means more than you know. I left her office and walked to the bus stop, feeling the warm Phoenix sun on my shoulders. The city felt different now. Less hostile. More like a place I could actually build a life. 2 weeks later, I got an unexpected email. It was from a woman named Beth Caroline, someone I didn't know. The subject line read, "Thank you." I opened it cautiously, half expecting spam or something cruel. Instead, it was genuine. Ms. Hartley, I'm writing because I was one of the investors defrauded by your sister. I lost nearly $30,000 in her scheme. When I heard about your lawsuit and your cooperation with the investigation, I wanted to reach out. Your courage to stand up to your family made it easier for the rest of us to come forward. Because of you, I'm getting some of my money back. More importantly, I feel like someone finally held them accountable. Thank you for not staying silent. Gratefully, Beth. I read the email 3 times. Then I saved it in a folder I titled Reminders. Over the following weeks, I received 2 more messages like it. People I'd never met, thanking me for something I'd done mostly for myself. It shifted how I saw the whole experience. It wasn't just about my stolen fund. It was about breaking a pattern. About refusing to let people with power and charm continue hurting others unchecked. Spring turned into summer. I kept working, kept building, kept showing up. The community center asked if I'd expand my design workshop into a full summer program. I agreed and recruited 2 other local designers to help teach. We had 15 students by the end of June, most of them kids who couldn't afford formal training. Watching them learn, watching their confidence grow, felt like the best possible use of my time. One evening after class, Carlos, the student who'd thanked me months ago for standing up to my family, stayed behind again. He had a folder in his hands. "I wanted to show you something," he said shyly. He opened the folder and pulled out a series of logo designs. They were good. Really good. Clean lines, clever concepts, professional execution. "These are incredible," I said honestly. "What are they for?" He shrugged. "I've been applying to design internships. I figured I needed a strong portfolio. You taught me how to build one." My chest tightened with pride. "You did this yourself, Carlos. I just showed you the tools." He smiled. "Yeah, but you believed I could do it. That mattered." A week later, he got accepted into a paid internship with a local marketing firm. He sent me a text with about 15 exclamation points. I framed his first logo design and hung it in the community center classroom. Proof that investment in people pays off in ways money never could. In late July, I received a certified letter. I recognized the law firm's name. My parents' attorneys. My stomach clenched as I opened it. Inside was a formal notice. Richard and Diane Hartley were filing for bankruptcy. The restitution payments to Brooks investors, combined with their legal fees and the settlement they'd paid me, had drained their resources. They were selling the house in Scottsdale. Liquidating assets. Starting over. I sat with that information for a long time. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel guilty either. I just felt distant, like reading about strangers in the news. Their choices had led them here. Not mine. I folded the letter and filed it away. Then I went outside and watered Aunt Helen's garden. The succulents were thriving, pushing out new growth in shades of green and purple. I'd planted some new varieties too. The garden was evolving, becoming something different than what Aunt Helen had started, but still rooted in her foundation. That weekend, Claire invited me to a gallery opening. One of her friends was showcasing photography, and she thought I'd enjoy it. I almost said no. Social events still felt awkward, like I was relearning how to be around people. But I went. The gallery was small, tucked into a renovated warehouse downtown. The photos were stunning. Landscapes, mostly. Desert scenes shot in golden hour light. I was studying one particularly beautiful image when someone spoke beside me. "You're Vanessa, right?" I turned. The man was maybe a few years older than me, with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers. "Tyler Brennan. Claire mentioned you might be here. I'm the one who designed the gallery's website." "Oh," I said, shaking his hand. "Your work is really clean. Great layout." He smiled. "Thanks. Claire showed me some of your stuff too. That nonprofit rebrand you did? Gorgeous." We ended up talking for over an hour. About design, about Phoenix, about the weird satisfaction of solving visual problems. It was easy. Comfortable. When the gallery started closing, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. Not as a date necessarily, just as fellow designers. I said yes. We met for coffee the following week at the Cactus Brew Cafe. Mr. Garrison, the owner, recognized me and brought over a free pastry. "Regular customer discount," he said with a wink. Tyler and I talked about our creative processes, our career paths, our struggles with client communication. It felt good to connect with someone over shared interests rather than shared trauma. As we were leaving, Tyler paused. "I know this might be forward, but Claire mentioned you've been through a rough time recently. I just want you to know you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. I appreciate that you're here as you, not as your story." I felt something loosen in my chest. "Thank you. Seriously. That means a lot." We started meeting regularly. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes to work side by side in co-working spaces, sometimes just to walk around downtown and look at street art. It wasn't romantic, at least not at first. It was friendship. The kind built on mutual respect and genuine interest. Exactly what I needed. In August, I decided to do something I'd been thinking about for months. I used part of the settlement money to establish a small scholarship fund. The Hartley Creative Fund, named after Aunt Helen, not my parents. It would provide $500 annually to a student pursuing design or creative work who demonstrated financial need and genuine passion. It wasn't huge, but it was something. I worked with Robert and Gwyn to set it up properly, making sure the structure was ironclad. No one could redirect these funds. Ever. The first recipient was a young woman named Jade who'd been in my summer workshop. She was incredibly talented but working 2 jobs to help support her family. When I told her she'd won the scholarship, she cried. "This changes everything," she said. "I can actually take that advanced software class now. I can build a real portfolio." Watching her reaction, I understood why Aunt Helen had set up my trust fund all those years ago. It wasn't just about money. It was about belief. About telling someone you see their potential and you're investing in it. September brought cooler temperatures and a sense of settling. I'd been in Phoenix for almost a year now. Aunt Helen's house felt completely like mine. I'd repainted the living room a warm terracotta. I'd converted her old craft room into a proper home office with a standing desk and a wall of inspiration boards. I'd built planter boxes in the backyard and started growing herbs. The physical work of transforming the space mirrored the internal work I'd been doing. Building something new from a foundation someone else had laid. One evening, I was organizing files on my laptop when I came across the folder labeled Evidence. The screenshots, the voicemails, the scanned letters. All the documentation from the lawsuit. I hovered over the delete button. Part of me wanted to erase it, to let go completely. But another part recognized it as a record. Not of pain, but of persistence. I renamed the folder History and moved it into my archives. Not gone, but not front and center anymore either. Tyler and I had dinner that night at a small Thai place near his apartment. Halfway through the meal, he looked at me thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure," I said. "What made you decide to fight back? Against your family, I mean." Most people just walk away quietly. I set down my fork and thought about it. I think it was realizing that staying quiet wasn't protecting me. It was protecting them. And I was tired of making myself smaller so they could feel bigger. He nodded. "That takes guts." I shrugged. "Or stubbornness. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." He laughed. "Either way, I'm glad you did. The world needs more people who refuse to disappear." We finished dinner and walked through downtown, the city lights reflecting off the glass buildings. It was one of those perfect Arizona evenings where the temperature drops just enough to feel comfortable. Tyler walked me to my car and hesitated before saying goodbye. "I've really enjoyed getting to know you, Vanessa. I'd like to keep doing this. If you're interested." I smiled. "I'm interested." October marked a full year since Aunt Helen's death. I took the day off work and drove out to the cemetery where she was buried. I brought fresh flowers, bright orange marigolds that reminded me of the desert sunset. I sat by her headstone and talked to her like she could hear me. Told her about the house. About the scholarship. About the lawsuit and the trial. About Carlos and Jade and all the students who were building their own paths now. About Tyler. About Claire. About the life I was creating. "I miss you," I said aloud. "But I think you'd be proud of what I'm building." A breeze kicked up, rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. I chose to take it as agreement. Before I left, I placed a small turquoise stone on her headstone. Something permanent. A marker that I'd been there and would keep coming back. November brought news that Brooke had been transferred to the correctional facility where she'd serve her sentence. My mother sent me an email. The first direct communication in months. It was short. Vanessa, I know we haven't spoken. I know there's too much hurt to fix with words. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Not for everything, maybe, because I still believe we were trying to do right by both of you. But I'm sorry for how it made you feel. I'm sorry we couldn't see what we were doing until it was too late. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. Mom. I read it several times. It wasn't a full apology. It was conditional, defensive, incomplete. But it was something. I drafted a response, deleted it, drafted another, deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote back. I appreciate you reaching out. I'm not ready to have a relationship right now. Maybe someday. Maybe not. But I'm okay either way. Take care of yourself. I hit send before I could overthink it. Tyler asked me to be his date to a design conference in December. We'd been seeing each other regularly for months, and it felt natural to make it official. The conference was in San Diego, a weekend trip that felt like a small adventure. We attended panels, networked with other designers, and spent the evenings walking along the beach. On the last night, we sat on the sand watching the waves, and he took my hand. I know we've been taking this slow, he said. And I respect that. But I want you to know I'm all in. Whatever pace you need, I'm here. I leaned against his shoulder. I'm all in too. Just figuring out what that looks like. He kissed the top of my head. We'll figure it out together. When I got back to Phoenix, I felt lighter. The city had become home in a way Denver never had. I knew my neighbors. I had favorite coffee shops and running routes. I had a community of students who looked up to me. I had colleagues who respected my work. I had friends who showed up without being asked. I had a partner who saw me as I was, not as who my family wanted me to be. In January, the marketing firm where I worked offered me a promotion to lead designer. It came with a significant raise and creative oversight on major campaigns. I accepted immediately. That same week, the second recipient of the Hartley Creative Fund was announced. A young man named Ethan who wanted to study animation. He sent me a handwritten thank you note. You don't know what this means. I thought I'd have to give up on this dream. Now I don't. Thank you for seeing me. I pinned his note on the inspiration board in my office, right next to Aunt Helen's framed letter. Be the builder. I was building. Not alone, but with intention. Not despite what my family had done, but because of what I'd learned from surviving it. I'd learned that worth isn't determined by who claims you. That family is something you can choose, not just something you're born into. That silence protects the wrong people. That standing up is terrifying and necessary. That sometimes the only way out is through. By February, I'd stopped checking my phone for messages from my parents. The space where anxiety used to live was replaced by something quieter. Not peace exactly, but acceptance. They were living their consequences. I was living my life. Those were separate things now, and that was okay. I ran into someone from their country club one afternoon at the grocery store. She recognized me and gave me a tight smile. I heard about everything that happened. Such a shame. Families should stick together. I just nodded politely. Some families do better apart. She looked taken aback, but I didn't elaborate. I paid for my groceries and left. That evening, I worked on a personal art project I'd started months ago. A digital collage combining photographs of the desert, architectural elements, and abstract shapes. I called it Foundation. It was bold and layered and unapologetically complex. When I finished, I printed it large format and hung it in my living room. Tyler came over and stood in front of it for a long time. This is powerful, he said. What inspired it? Everything, I said. Loss and rebuilding. Endings and beginnings. Taking what's broken and making something new. He kissed my temple. That's exactly what you've done. Spring arrived again, marking a full cycle. The garden exploded with color. The succulents bloomed in shades of pink and yellow. I planted tomatoes and basil in the back. I repainted the porch furniture. I hosted a small dinner party, inviting Claire, Tyler, Mr. Garrison from the cafe, and a few students from the workshop. We ate on the patio under string lights I'd hung between the trees. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and the sound of glasses clinking. Sitting there, surrounded by people I'd chosen and who'd chosen me back, I felt it. The thing I'd been chasing without knowing its name. Not happiness exactly, because that felt too simple. More like wholeness. Like I'd gathered all the scattered pieces of myself and arranged them into something coherent. Something real. Something mine. Later that night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Vanessa, this is Brooke. I'm allowed limited communication now. I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted to say I'm using my time here to actually deal with my stuff. Therapy. Accountability. All of it. I'm learning that being the favorite didn't make me happy. It just made me afraid of losing it. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're building something good. You deserve it. I read the message twice. Then I set my phone down without responding. Not out of cruelty, but because I didn't owe her absolution. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe not. Either way was okay. I finished cleaning, turned off the lights, and went to my room. Aunt Helen's turquoise bracelet sat on my nightstand. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the smooth stones, and put it on. Then I pulled out my journal and wrote. A year ago, I had nothing but a backpack and grief. Today, I have a home. A career. People who see me. A future I'm actively building. I don't know if this is what Aunt Helen imagined when she left me her house and her savings. But I think she'd recognize it. I think she'd see the foundation she helped lay and the structure I'm building on top of it. I'm not the same person I was when she died. I'm stronger. More certain. Less willing to shrink. I don't know what comes next. But I know I'll face it standing up, speaking up, and refusing to disappear. That's enough. That's everything. I closed the journal and turned off the light. Through the window, I could see the Phoenix skyline glowing in the distance. The city that had felt so hostile a year ago now felt full of possibility. I'd survived the worst thing my family could do to me. I'd fought back. I'd won. And more importantly, I'd built something they could never take away. A life that was completely, undeniably mine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.